Hello everybody, Bruce here with a short video overview of the picture switcher that you'll find in Module 2 in Canvas. What you can see here is obviously a picture that's being swapped out every 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds. The picture and the source, image source for that picture are also being switched out, and as you can see here, the image is always staying in the center of the page because this particular page is set up with Flexbox. You can take a look at the CSS to see that. So how are we doing this, right? By the way, if I place my mouse over the image, the rotation of the images stops. As soon as I move my mouse out, you'll start to see that the images will begin to swap out again. All right, so let's take a look at the code. Let's first take a look at the HTML, and here you go. It's pretty simple, right? I have a container div, a div with a class of container that is set to be a Flexbox, and I'll show you the CSS in a moment. Inside, I have another division here with an image whose source is set to be this first image here that's in the images folder. All right. Below that, I have another division where I have the initial source location of that image, right? It's the same thing here. I neglected to put the images path there. It's not needed. And note that both of these have an ID, right? The image has the image1 ID, and the division has, the text of the image has image info, all right? And then at the bottom, we're loading up an external JavaScript file called app.js. Let's look at the style sheet. So you can see right here on the container, it's set to display flex. The flex direction is column, such that these two things right here, right? These two things right here, the divs, are going to align in a column because we have the flex direction set to column as opposed to row. And we're justifying the content center, we're aligning the items to the center, and we're setting the height of the container to be 100 VH, which is the height of the viewport, okay, the height of the browser window. And that's going to change as you saw me resize it earlier. So let's look at the JavaScript. And in the JavaScript on line 3, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use query selector to find the IMG tag, right, that has that ID of image1, because that's the thing we're going to need to change the HTML source attribute for, right, as we want to rotate through the pictures, right? The next thing on line number 4 is getting a handle to that div where the source name, right, the image, image name, right, that's what it is going to be placed, right? This thing right here, right? 401-400.x400.jpg, right? So that's that. This is the image, all right? So I'm then setting the an array called pics to the names of the various images that I have stored in the images folder, all right? And then I'm setting a variable called current equal to the name of that first image. I'm then creating a variable called timer, and you'll see this in a second. I have a function called start switcher. We'll get to this in a second. A function called stop switcher. We'll talk about that in a second. And we'll talk about start in a second as well. But the first thing I'm going to do here on lines 30 and 31 is bind two event listeners to the image. The first one is going to be when the person mouses over that image. We're going to stop the switching of the images. Hence, we're calling the stop switcher function that I haven't talked about yet. And then when the person mouses their mouse back out, we're going to start switching again, and we're going to call the start function, right? So the script loads, it gets to the bottom here, and it's going to call the start function. So we hop up to line 25, and on line 25, we are going to create an interval that invokes the start switcher function, and we're going to have it invoke that function every 3,000 milliseconds or every 3 seconds. We are then storing the value of that interval so we can stop it. That's why we're saving it to a variable. And then we're just logging out, printing out to the console, the animation has been started. And I neglected to show that, by the way. So here is my console. Let me reload it. And you can see here the animation has started, right? And if I move my mouse over it, you can see that it has stopped. And if I move my mouse out, we can see that it has started again. All right, let's go back to the code. So when we do the interval, we're calling the start switcher. So let's take a look at that function right here. We're on line 10. Function start switcher takes no parameters. We're then getting a number, right? A random number that's going to be we're going to use the math library built into JavaScript, and we're going to generate a random number, and we're going to multiply that times the length of the array, and then we're going to floor it, right? We're going to round it down, okay? So that's going to give us a position that we can then use to go grab the next image. But we need to make sure that we're not placing the same image that's already being shown, right? That wouldn't be too cool. So what that's going to do, when we set the value on line 7 of current, that was the first image. So what's going to happen is this thing is going to, execute. It's going to generate a number, and then it's going to regenerate another number, right? And it's going to make sure that it's not the same. Now, I'll tell you that this isn't perfect, because what I really should have done is made a while loop here to make sure that they're not the same. So that's my bad. Maybe you can fix it. And what I'm going to do here is generate another random number, right? So again, I would have replaced this with a while loop until these two are not equal to one another. And then what I'm going to do is store in a variable that position that was selected and make that the current position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the image and I'm going to change out the src attribute of it, and I'm going to append on the path images / and then the image, right, from the array here that was selected. And we're just going to glue those together, change the source attribute in the HTML, and then we're also going to set the inner text of this thing, right? Let me close this here. This thing right here to match the picture that's being shown. As you can see, it just changed, right? So that's that function, right? And then the stop switcher function, right, is going to get called because it was bound to this event listener when I mouse over. It's going to go here. It's going to clear the timer interval, right? Remember, we stored that because we're going to need to do this, and then we'll show on the console that the animation has stopped. And then anytime someone mouses out over that image, the event listener fires off, and it reinvokes the timer and calls the start switcher function, and we are done. All right. So again, what I should really do here is I should put a while loop here, right? Could I do this? While current position equals this, do that instead of an if statement. What do you think of that? Should that work? Well, let's go look. Let's see if it still works. Okay, it's looking good. Looking good. Good. Well, I think I fixed my bug, right? And if you don't think I fixed my bug, leave a comment on the YouTube video here. But again, the issue I had with the if statement, it was only going to check once. And what happens if we keep generating the same number over and over again? We don't want to keep showing the same picture, right? So that's what this loop does here. All right, well, that's all the code for now, and I hope this video helps in your JavaScript journey, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.